Welcome to the first half of the webinar, Perfect Storm or Perfect Opportunity, the convergence of healthcare reform and increased emphasis on quality measurement. My name is Steve Casey and I was the host of the webinar. This webinar was produced as a service to the community by the PharmaHelps Network, the pharmaceutical industry collaboration for patient engagement. In the interest of making the recording more concise and available for you on YouTube, we have condensed the non-panel discussion and split the webinar into two videos. In this first half of the recording, I will do a short introduction of the panel, the topic, and then we will join the panel discussion in progress. The aim of the webinar was to have an open discussion with various members of the healthcare community about the impact of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act and how pharmaceutical marketing may participate in new healthcare delivery models. Although there are numerous areas that could be discussed in this topic, due to the constraints of time, the discussion concentrates on the law's effects on the delivery of health care from the provider. With that in mind, let me quickly introduce the panel. First, we had Dr. Robert Itis, a recognized leader in the area of health quality and outcomes, having spent 12 years affiliated with the National Committee on Quality Assurance, including serving for 9 years on the Review Oversight Committee. Currently, he is the president of Vanguard Medical Group in Cranford, New Jersey, a multi-site practice that follows the patient-centered medical home model. Also, we had Dr. Stephen Peskin, an expert in managed care and healthcare innovation. He is currently the Senior Medical Director, Clinical Innovations at Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, and Associate Clinical Professor of Medicine at Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. He sits on the editorial board of the Journal of Managed Care Pharmacy and Product Management Today. From the pharma side, we had Bob Brown, a partner at Bryant Brown Healthcare with over 30 years of experience in medical marketing. Bob and Bryant Brown work with blue chips as well as startups, developing professional and patient education programs and marketing campaigns for pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies, medical device manufacturers, health information technology firms, health plans, hospitals, and professional and patient advocacy organizations. And myself, Steve Casey, I am the founder and managing director of MedAdvocacy LLC, which owns the PharmaHelps Network. Now that you know who the panel is, let's get started. The question is the implementation of PPACA, the perfect storm or the perfect opportunity. To answer this, let's first review what is clear about PPACA implementation. It'll bring more. More patients, more technology, more metrics, more impact on healthcare delivery, more demands on healthcare provider resources, and very importantly, more demand on patient empowerment. After a brief presentation on some of the various new regulations and endeavors, such as electronic health records and meaningful use, I asked the panel if they thought PPACA was the perfect storm or the perfect opportunity, and the physicians agreed that it was an opportunity. Interestingly, though, so did Bob Brown and I, as we prefer to see the law for the new opportunities it creates instead of dwelling on the old methods it roadblocks. We now join the discussion already in progress with Dr. Itis answering a question from the audience by giving an example of a value-added program for pharma that could be a shared value program or a win for all parties and the healthcare system.
Periodically take a PHQ-9, and if they're having any side effects, they could query it to find out, are these likely side effects of the medication? When should I call my doctor, etc. Now, that kind of situation would make it much easier for me to prescribe the medication. It would give the patient tools to help them care for themselves. And would likely result in adherence. So, those are kind of tools that, a rising tide lifts all ships, and granted that tool might be used for non-branded products as well as branded products, but for the share that's branded, people are going to get better outcomes if they are in better control of their of how to use the medication properly.
Yeah, just to build on Bob's comments, we had 9 companies in, so ostensibly somewhat competitive, and we went through what our vision was around diabetes care, around how we might work with pharmaceutical companies on lifestyle and certainly medication adherence, which everyone collectively is interested in. Any kinds of programs, tools, tracking systems, use of smartphones, and that sort of thing. One company has been providing to practices some nurse diabetes educators for evening programs for education and reinforcement of diet and lifestyle, as well as medication adherence and blood glucose monitoring. So we are certainly open, as are other payers, to the right kinds of collaboration with industry. We're working with another company. They've developed some things on teaching motivational interviewing. So we said that's consistent, very consistent with what we're all about, working with physicians and advanced practice nurses and so forth. So we've kind of allowed that to be part of a collaboration with a particular company.
Great. Bob Brown, anything?
I just want to ask, Stephen, is that a point of entry for the potential pharmaceutical partners, or are they already working with you? I'm just curious if that was, kind of level the playing field just to provide access for those companies to your decision makers, or if they're already within your system and you are now looking forward together to the types of programs that would help your patients.
Well, the 9 companies that came together to hear from our clinical director of pharmacy, and myself and a couple of other people, I would say that there's a high probability that all those companies have products on formulary or that don't have restricted access. So this is a building upon the other company that I mentioned around the motivational interviewing. Majority of their products are again, on formulary in the typical 3-tiered. It's likely that the products are in branded products that have generic equivalents are in a 3rd tier, but not necessarily disadvantaged with any step edits or step throughs or prior authorization.
Okay.
And the types of programs that you're requesting for patient engagement, or at least that you're, everyone agrees would be helpful, are those could those types of programs change the tier level of a branded product within your system? Would that make the difference, or is it ultimately going to be a price-driven decision?
Probably not any kind of immediate change in a tier status. In terms of future product introductions and where you might have competition among branded products, such as in the NOAC, novel oral anticoagulant category, it may give one company a relative advantage over another, depending on how deep that relationship is on the clinical side. But clearly, there's also compelling price considerations as well.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question from more from the perspective of something I just wrote an article about. But it's looking at the individual provider and what goes on in the provider's office. In the old days, from a pharma marketing perspective, we used to think of the provider in kind of a cyclical way. You had a patient come in, and the patient would go through, the provider would go through a typical process of looking at the charts or all those type of things. And when you look at the data says that there's about 5 minutes is spent with a patient on average. And then when you look at inside that 5 minutes, there's a very small section of it is dedicated towards the pharma treatment or the pharma prescription that's being given. Do you think with the new responsibilities or the different ways that the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act is being implemented and some of the requirements that are being requested, do you think that the that the physician is going to be less give less time to the discussion about the therapeutic or more time to that. Whether it's a generic or a brand, it really doesn't matter. Dr. Itis, can you comment on that?
Could you just clarify that again?
Okay, so if on a regular basis you're talking to the patients, and the patients are coming in, currently it's estimated that about a minute, a little less than a minute, is given towards the discussion on the pharmaceutical or brand that's being given. Do you think the requirements from the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act that are requiring physicians to spend more time talking about disease management and aspects of that are going to cut down on the time that they can spend talking about the pharmaceuticals, so to speak?
No, I don't think so. I think it's all part of the mix. I think we're a little bit smarter now that if we don't spend time explaining why we're giving a medication to a patient, actually even before we give a medication, to actually involve them in the decision as to whether or not to have a medication and whether or not and which one to do. That all of that needs to be done in order to get better outcomes. So the Affordable Care Act, we're moving inexorably down the road towards accountability. We're going to be accountable for outcomes. We're going to be accountable for total cost of care, not breaking it up into behavioral health spend, pharma spend, hospital spend, but we're going to look at the whole pie. And therefore, people are going to understand that we have to look comprehensively at the issues that are needed to treat the patient. And so, one of the issues is that we have to get better at understanding why people do not take prescription medications. And, it usually starts from the patient not being actively involved in the decision to take the medication to begin with. People don't educate doctors when we're trained as to how to collaborate with the patient on making these decisions. It's a top-down decision. So we're relearning all these things to the extent that we have tools, whether they're provided by electronic health records, by pharma, by websites or whatever, that help us do it, that's better. But I don't see an inherent conflict.
Okay. Dr. Peskin, do you have anything in that area that you want to say, or?
About conflict, or?
Yeah, about just the time management construct, and is that going to cause less time for pharmaceutical discussion between the provider and the patient?
So again, the conversation between the provider and the patient, we're and again, Bob's practice is a great example of that. We're proponents of advancing more time in conversation and less time on the hamster wheel, though that continues to be a challenge. So, and time with the patient might be time with an advanced practice nurse, a nurse, even a medical assistant operating to the top of his or her certification to do more than just room the patient, to maybe ask or remind about screening, whether it be breast mammography or colorectal cancer screening, or, oh, I see you're due for a pneumococcal vaccine, you've reached that age and you've not had one. So, we're advancing or advocating for more time to be spent among the healthcare professionals as opposed to providers, although both are interchangeable, I suppose, among the healthcare professionals and the patients, what we would call the members. Then we have other healthcare professionals who interact with members or patients telephonically, and sometimes, as Bob mentioned, by e-conversation as well.